100% of the time, the feelings that you're experiencing, the emotions that you're experiencing are coming from you. And most of the world operates from the exact opposite perspective. 95 to 99% of the world operates from the perspective of the outside world is causing what my feelings are as the effect. And what we're telling people is, no, you're creating your emotional state every second, every moment with your thinking.
So today I have a absolutely fantastic guest to introduce you today, and I hope I don't butcher his last name. It's Chris Lauretig. Did I say it right, Chris?
Yeah,
I'm not
yes,
sure.
you did.
That's awesome. So Chris is an amazing man, and I first met him years ago at a spiritual retreat I heard him teaching at, and I can tell you that retreat put my entire life on a different trajectory. So I'd like to introduce you to this amazing man. Chris is a public speaker, spiritual coach, author, and special education teacher who lives in Cleveland, Ohio. He has a passion for pursuing self-awareness as a key to living a happy life. His dedication to self-awareness led to the creation of the Out of the Matrix program, a weekend intensive designed to help people live happier lives. And that's where I met Chris for the first time, actually. In 2014, Chris published his book, Living the Guided Life, a guide to conscious connection with your inner guide. I also have that book, and it's fabulous. He has facilitated over 50 Out of the Matrix weekends and over a dozen other presentations throughout the country. Chris's passion and depth of awareness is evident in his public appearances, or if you just chat him up for a few minutes, you'll find out what an amazing guy he is. One of Chris's most unique qualities as a teacher is his amazing ability to explain complex spiritual ideas to both the novice and the advanced student. So, as I had said, Chris, going to the Out of the Matrix was an absolute pivotal point in my life. When I heard about Out of the Matrix, I was a fitness trainer. And one of my students actually came to class every week, and he kept trying to get me to go. And I was like, no, I don't want to go to a whole weekend thing. What's that going to do for me? And he kept persisting. And at one point, I just got into a really low place in my life. I think it was probably the lowest place in my life. I was depressed, anxious, miserable. I'd just gone through a breakup. And I had my self-esteem demolished. I was in a relationship with a narcissist, and I just felt terrible about myself. And I couldn't figure out how to even begin to change my life and bring myself out of those circumstances. So I thought, what have I got to lose? I decided to go. And it was absolutely amazing. I learned so much. And I felt 75% better just by realizing where my issues were coming from and getting some ideas of how to forge a path forward and just bring myself out of that, because I learned where peace of mind truly comes from. Now, Chris, tell us how you discovered these spiritual principles that you now teach and how you got involved with Out of the Matrix.
Yeah, well, thank you for the introduction, Tiffany. Yeah, let's see. I think as a child, I was always interested in alternative ways of thinking about things. And luckily, I grew up in a non-spiritual, non-religious family. So I had sort of an open book to discover what I wanted to discover. I didn't have some of the biases that some people who follow a religious practice have. So I was able to just discover and explore whatever I wanted to explore. But fast forward to my mid-30s, and I discovered a book called A Course in Miracles. And that's the book that sort of changed the trajectory of my life. And it began a process of my looking at taking responsibility for my life in a different kind of a way. And that's really how I started with Out of the Matrix as well. That got me in touch with that. Course in Miracles is a fantastic book. And it's all about letting go of your ego and taking responsibility for your life.
And isn't that kind of a core message with what you teach? It's personal responsibility.
Yeah, when you gave your introduction and your experience of Out of the Matrix, I just kept thinking about the fact that one of the core ideas is that most people think their misery comes from outside of them, and they are at the effect of the cause of the world, when in reality, what we teach is you're the cause of what shows up in your life. And you're not at effect, you're the cause.
And I think that's so important, because have you noticed that in today's society, particularly, there's a push towards a victim mindset. I've never seen it as strong and as prevalent and as strong as it has been. That push towards victimization and viewing yourself from the perspective of every internal struggle I'm facing is a direct cause of something in my life that I don't like, or someone in my life who's affecting me in a negative way. And so when I came to that weekend, the first thing I was under the impression that all my problems were caused by this narcissistic man that I dated. All my problems were caused by my traumatic childhood. And I just didn't have an understanding that there was some responsibility for me. So even if we can't go back and we can't change what happened to us in the past. I couldn't change the fact that I'd been in that relationship. But what I can do moving forward is make different decisions and make different choices so I don't end up in that relationship again. I couldn't go back and fix my childhood. My mom is an alcoholic, and before my dad got custody of me, there was a lot of early developmental trauma. I couldn't go back and change that. But what I can do now is change my life currently, my way of thinking and my subconscious beliefs. And I think my biggest takeaway that absolutely changed my life was the fact that we actually have these beliefs within our subconscious mind. And if we look at our behaviors, that's really more indicative of what we actually believe subconsciously than what we think we believe. Because the interesting thing was that I thought, if you would ask me, do you have good self-esteem, Tiffani? Before I went, I would have said, oh, yeah, I think I'm, da, 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 da. And I realized getting there that no, I actually didn't. Because if I did, I wouldn't be making the choices I was making unless I had certain beliefs about myself. And so ultimately, I realized at my core, I truly believed I was worthless. I truly believed I was unlovable. And I was manifesting the results of those beliefs in my life. And it seems like our culture is really going in a difficult direction right now. And I'm especially seeing this with young people. And now, when I met you, you were working a lot with troubled teens. And these teens are in some difficult situations. And a lot of them had some severe behavioral issues. So just talk more about your work with kids.
Yeah, let's go back for a second. There's a lot to be had there.
Sure.
And talk about cause and effect for a second. Cause and effect is one of the primary issues. And you're talking about the world and the way that people are showing up today. And I question whether it's worse than it's been in the past. I think we're more aware of it because of social media. Whether it's worse than it's been in the past, I don't know. I think maybe it's been there all along and we're just more aware of it. But I don't know that for sure. That's sort of my take on it. But when it comes to cause and effect, in the world, there's not too many guarantees we can present. There's not too many times we can say to people, this is 100% true 100% of the time. But one of the primary concepts that we teach in Out of the Matrix is this idea that 100% of the time, the feelings that you're experiencing, the emotions that you're experiencing are coming from you. And most of the world operates from the exact opposite perspective. 95 to 99% of the world operates from the perspective of the outside world is causing what my feelings are as the effect. And what we're telling people is, no, you're creating your emotional state every second, every moment with your thinking. And that's incredibly important. And it's a total reversal from the way the world actually perceives it. So what I'm telling you is almost 100% of the world works from this premise of being outer directed. In other words, blaming outside sources for their happiness and their upset. And the fact of the matter is it's 100% the opposite. 100% of the time, every individual is responsible for creating their emotional experience in any particular moment. It's never created by something outside of you. And some people might challenge that idea and wonder about that. First, we'll talk about a little bit of science, which is we found that emotions are actually chemical releases from the brain. They're neuropeptides that get released from the brain and get docked on the cells of the body. So it's actually going on, your emotions are actually being biologically generated inside your body. So that in that way, you're 100% responsible. And then we can take some examples from society. People say they love Donald Trump, they hate Donald Trump, they love Joe Biden, they hate Joe Biden, and they blame Joe Biden or Donald Trump for that hate and that love. But if Donald Trump or Joe Biden were responsible for those feelings, then everyone would feel the same. It's not that those individuals are not responsible for the way people are perceived or the way people feel about them. What's happening is it's their thoughts about those individuals that are creating their feelings. And so that's when you explain that to people, they take that in and they can kind of understand it. But when you start to look at your entire life and realize, oh, I've been doing this to me myself my entire life. I've been creating my feelings. This is how we teach people to be responsible for their feelings.
Yeah. And that's just so, I think it's liberating. I think when people first hear this, sometimes they get mad. They get mad. So what do you mean? I'm responsible for my feelings. But believing that everyone else determines how you feel, that all these circumstances out there determine how you feel is extremely disempowering. That makes you helpless. And we know from stress research that the most debilitating, stressful mindset that you can have is to believe that you are helpless. So this is an incredibly empowering message to take that personal responsibility and realize that no matter what's going on outside of me, I can actually change how I'm feeling. I can actually have that peace of mind. I can experience that love. I can be in a state of joy despite what was just said to me, despite what is happening in the world, despite what happened to me in the past. And people need this message of hope, because don't you think it's kind of rare? I mean, the whole message out there, and maybe you're right, that message has always been there, is that it's other people. There's this outside in approach, and what you're offering people is an inside out approach. Is that correct?
Yeah, and your first comment, I think you're right. I think a lot of people might get frustrated or angry, and people listening to this might say to themselves, or might want to say to us, yeah, but you don't understand. You got to look at who my partner is. You got to look at who my parents are. You got to look at my life and see how bad it is. And I get that, and I understand that. But you're right. It's incredibly empowering to realize that you're actually creating your life, creating your experience with the way you think about things. And so you can have a life where you spend your time trying to manage all the people, places, and things outside of you and get them all to show up in the way that you need them to show up so you can be happy, which is near impossible. Think about that, trying to manage all the people in my life, get them to treat me right, have the right stuff show up in my life, have the weather show up correctly, have the right sports team win, have my partner treat me wonderfully, have enough money in my bank account. I need all those things to line up for me to really be happy all the time. And it's impossible to manage all of that. But what we're saying is what you can do is manage the way you think about things. And that's much more manageable, to use the word again. It's much more manageable to decide that I'm going to choose how I think about things rather than need things to change for me to be okay. And so for someone out there listening thinking, but you don't realize how bad my life is, it takes practice. I'm not telling you you're going to listen to this podcast and all of a sudden you're going to start thinking differently about your partner and it's all going to be wonderful. It's going to take some time. It's going to take practice. You have to study this information. You have to reinforce it, again, with reading, with listening to podcasts, with watching videos, getting an understanding of how exactly this works biologically, but also just interactively with other people and in my mind. How can I manage changing my thoughts about things? So a simple example would be when I go to the grocery store and I have the rude grocery store clerk. I can get frustrated by that. I can get angry at the rude grocery store clerk and get frustrated with that treatment because I'm buying something, I'm essentially paying for her job, and here she is being rude to me. Or I can see that maybe she's having a bad day, and that's all it is, and it has nothing to do with me. And that's a very simple example of how I'm going to maintain my peace of mind by saying, this has nothing to do with me. This is just her having a bad day. That's all it is.
That's so interesting because I also use that little mantra, if I could use that word. Like I will try to remind myself that the driver in front of me is driving too slow and hitting the brakes and I start to get frustrated because I'm in a hurry. I need to get someplace and I just say to myself that this has nothing to do with me. And that's a very powerful statement. That you can remind yourself frequently that other people's behavior has nothing to do with me. And that's one of the primary things I teach people with social anxiety, because they tend to internalize everyone's behavior as if, it's all a judgment against them. But it's really their own experiences, their own world, and how they're seeing things. And it gives us an incredible amount of control, because I think people get really scared when they feel out of control. But the only thing we really have control over is our internal world. And I think a lot of people don't realize how powerful that is. And you have seen, the interesting thing to me was I had a friend and he traveled for work. And he would travel to third world countries. I think he worked in the nuclear industry and he was part of an inspection team for some of the power plants. And they don't put power plants in rich, wealthy cities. They put power plants in poor rural villages. And he said the amazing thing that he discovered was that he suspected that when he would travel to, say, China into a rural village, he expected the people to be really unhappy. They only had a couple of changes of clothing. They didn't have any material items. They lived in a little hut. And he said, I met the happiest people that I could ever imagine. And then he would go to other countries where people had more wealth, or back in the United States, and you see people that have everything that they said that they wanted in order to be happy, but they're not happy, because it really isn't those things outside. It isn't that car, that relationship, that new house that you really want. It's your thought processes internally. And really, we have access to the three things I think people really want: peace of mind, love, joy. We want these things. And then we try to continually rearrange our external environment to get those things. But the thing I've noticed, and I know all of us, if we're really honest with ourselves, we've noticed it. If you have the kind of thinking habit that you believe that you need to acquire these things, change these things. Have you ever noticed when you get those things, you're still not happy? Now your brain has up leveled and it's given you, here's the 5 things you now need to be happy. And then you're now on that same treadmill that you'll never get off of, because you're not realizing where your true peace of mind comes from.
Yeah, and if we think about the United States, one of the richest countries in the history of mankind, and the wealth and the stuff that we have, and still antidepressants are the second most prescribed medication in the world, in our country. And so why are people so depressed? Because of exactly what you just described. They're realizing they spend their time trying to gather things, stuff, get people to treat them the right way, and then they're still not happy and they can't understand why. And the reason is they have it wrong. They think that's the cause. The cause is their own thinking. As you mentioned, the beliefs they have about themselves. When I feel not worthy, and it's on a scale of 1 to 10, it's an 8, that it's very hard to have a happy life when I think I'm not worthy. So one of the things we do in Out of the Matrix is we help people understand, as you described with your weekend, we help people get in touch with what kind of false belief they have about themselves, that they're not lovable, that they're not good enough, that they're not worthy. And it's very important that we get in touch with those false beliefs so that we can decide that they're not true and realize that they're not true. And I know in the weekends, oftentimes when someone first gets in touch with one of these false beliefs, first, they're shocked to find out that they think that of themselves. As you mentioned, it was sort of shocking to you. You thought you had high self-esteem, and you realized, no, I have some worthiness, false beliefs about worthiness. And so at first people are shocked, and then after a while they start to realize, oh, wow, this is really pervasive. I can see it in so many aspects of how I handle my job, how I handle my relationship, how I handle my family, that I'm approaching things with a worthless belief, and that worthless belief tends to skew our view of everything. And so there's lots of examples that we give about how people do that. We had a woman who came into one of our weekends who had 3 PhDs, and she was working on her 4th PhD. And it turns out, she found out in that weekend that she had an I'm stupid belief. And so you wouldn't think that of someone who had 3 PhDs. So obviously a brilliant lady working really hard. And what she was trying to do was it was that false belief was in her subconscious mind, and it was driving her choices and her behavior. She was trying to outrun that belief by getting all these PhDs. And as she examined it, she realized that when she was growing up, her dad told her she was stupid all the time. And so this was her subconscious process of trying to outrun that belief. And it's never going to work. As long as that false belief is in my subconscious mind, driving my choices and my behavior, I'm going to continue to operate from that premise. And so she needed to get in touch with that subconscious belief and start to challenge it and realize that that's been driving her behavior. And then she's got the freedom to choose something different. But when the subconscious belief is in that subconscious mind driving our choices, we have no conscious ability to choose differently.
Yeah.
It's a lot of information.
No, that's fantastic. And that was a key for me. And that's what I do in my work as well, as I locate these subconscious drivers and help the client to make a shift and a change. And that's where I think people get upset when we talk about personal responsibility, because they think that means that they're responsible for these internal struggles in their subconscious. These things are programmed in. So if you had a father that told you you're stupid, as a child, you're probably going to believe you're stupid. If you were bullied at school and told you were ugly and worthless, you're probably going to believe that. So although we can't change the past, what we can change is making a shift on a subconscious level, so the rest of our lives is not guided by that same trajectory. Because sometimes we look back at our past and think, wow, I discovered my negative, limiting, toxic beliefs, and they've really messed up a lot of my life. I've made some bad decisions. I've had some bad circumstances as a result of this internal milieu. And then now, they feel powerless to change that. They feel like they're just being pulled along helpless. But it's really not true that there's so much we can do to change on a subconscious level. And when we change on a subconscious level, we watch our lives change. Our relationships are different because we are living differently as well. We're not making the same choices, right?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the ways that I've heard this described, actually, Joe Dispenza describes it this way, is it's a program that starts running. So we have a I'm not good enough belief, and it's subconscious, and it's the program that's running in my mind, and it's operating. And unless I get in touch with that and become a witness to it, I am the program. The program is running me. It's in my subconscious mind. I am the program. So what we have to do is identify that the program is operating, get outside of it and become a witness or an observer of that program. So I can look back and say, there, I have a not good enough belief, and here's how I see it operating in my life. And that allows me to make different choices. But we've got to become that neutral observer outside of the program so that we're no longer the program.
Now, don't you think what happens is people develop an identity based on these limiting beliefs, based on this programming? So they see themselves according to this big label that they've placed on themselves. It's almost like they're wearing a banner that says stupid, and they think that that's who they are. And what people don't realize is that these, I call them restrictive identities. These identities we develop based on these subconscious beliefs, they're not really us. They're programmed in, but they're not our destiny. They're not who we need to become. And when the belief shifts, everything shifts. So if you believe you're stupid, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, even though you're not actually stupid. If you believe you're ugly, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because when you look in the mirror, that's what you see, and you live and behave as if you were. And that changes lives negatively. And all of that can be shifted, though. That is the great news. Our past does not have to determine our future. And what can be programmed in can also be programmed out. And we can learn to have actual empowering beliefs about ourselves, right?
Yeah, again, it's sort of the same example as we get into that program is running in my subconscious mind. And subconscious means, of course, it's out of my awareness. It's happening and I don't realize it consciously. And so when that's going on, I feel like I have no choice. This is the only way I can operate, because this is what's going on. As you said, it's sort of a label that we're wearing, but it's subconscious. We can't really see it consciously. It's driving our choices and driving our life. And we can't make a different choice, and we don't understand why. when I've done presentations to rooms full of 200 people, and I've asked, how many of you participate in behaviors and you're not sure why you participate in that behavior? And invariably, almost everyone in the room raises their hand. And the reason they're participating in behaviors and they don't understand why is because their subconscious stuff is driving their choices. It's driving their behavior. And so one of the things that we do in Out of the Matrix is try and get them in touch with that. And yes, you're absolutely right. Then it is life-changing to realize that I've been operating from a worthless belief for the majority of my adult life. And to witness it now, one of the issues is that people then tend to beat themselves up and think, what's wrong with me? Why have I been doing that? And we ask that they not do that. Again, we want them to be a neutral observer, a witness of what they have been doing. And then when you can neutrally observe it, you can neutralize it. You can look back and say, well, I don't want to do that anymore. When you see that you've been doing that and you judge yourself for doing that, you're creating more of the problem. So we really work hard with folks trying to teach them, don't judge yourself for having a worthless belief. You didn't realize it was going on, recognize it now and make a different choice. So you're absolutely right. Life-changing to recognize those false beliefs and then make a different choice. And choice is the key here. Again, when we have a subconscious program running, we feel like we don't have a choice. This is my only way of operating. And once we get in touch with that, the power of choice comes back into our life. I can choose to continue to operate from an I'm stupid belief and get another PhD, or I can decide, you know what, I don't want to do that anymore to myself. I want to make a different choice in my life. So choice is one of the keys here. And it's one of, as you mentioned very early on in our call here, that it's one of the most empowering things to realize that I have choice in terms of how I want to perceive everything, not just myself in this moment, but I also have a choice of how I perceive my past. So when I've gone through a past that's been difficult in childhood, again, children especially tend to take things very personally. So when a parent is abusive or neglectful, the child tends to make it about themselves and say, there's something wrong with me. That's why my parent is behaving this way. And as an adult, when we get in touch with these ideas, we can look back and say, no, what was going on is my parent was in pain. That's why they were operating the way they were operating. It had nothing to do with my being worthless, not good enough, or not lovable. So not only can we change our perception of the moment, we can change our perception of the past, which is also incredibly empowering.
Yeah. And that's much of the work I do in helping people to reframe the past in a way that they gain empowerment and realize they're not bound by these labels and subconscious drivers that were put in motion. And that was something that I think if I had to pinpoint the most transformational thing I learned attending the Out of the Matrix weekend was the fact that as I looked at my life currently, I did what I said I would never do. And what I always said I would never do growing up was that I couldn't understand why women would ever date abusive men. Why would they put up with that? Why would they? And then I found myself in that position, dating someone who's abusive, that relationship's breaking up, and I'm constantly, almost addictively driven back to that same abuse over and over again. And I looked at myself in the mirror and went, who am I? And I was judging myself. And even initially, to be honest with you, entering Out of the Matrix, my first day there, I started judging myself until that was really discussed, was that, gosh, why do I have all these negative beliefs? I'm really messed up. I'm really broken. I started to think that about myself. But the key thing is that we all do the best we can with the knowledge we have. So, right. When we know more, we do better. So the real key is to get that knowledge of what is subconsciously driving you, and then get the knowledge of how to alter that and empower yourself so the rest of your life looks differently. Not just externally, because there's always those things we have absolutely no control over. But when we learn to control that internal world and our thinking process and our beliefs, we have this confidence that, okay, no matter what happens in this life, I have the ability to be happy. I have the ability to be at peace. I have the ability to experience joy despite the stuff that's going on in the world or even in my life, because we can't control that. And if we give up that control, we have so much energy left over for really changing our lives internally.
Yeah, and one of the concepts here that's important to realize is that when you come to an Out of the Matrix weekend or some other process where you're learning this information at 35 or 40 years old, you have to realize that you've been practicing I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable for 35 or 40 years. So it's not going to happen overnight, but you got to start practicing I'm lovable, I'm worthy, I'm good enough. And so that's where it starts. But it is a practice. It's a practice that needs to be put into play into your life. And the practice is mostly with practice is in reading, understanding, meeting new people, understanding new concepts, but it also is practice in how I think about things. So for instance, when there's a tragedy, like recently there was the shooting in Nashville, one of the things that we do is we tend to feel sad or angry and have hate for the person who did that, or hate for the world because it's going on. And one of the ways that we can rethink that is it's hate and sadness that creates those kind of experiences in the world in the first place. So what does it call for? It calls for love. So that's a way for me to realize staying in a state of peace, love, and joy is the best thing I can do for a situation like that. Now, that doesn't mean that I tolerate it or I don't do some things, send money, try and help out in any way that I can, but I do it from a place of peace, love, and joy instead of hate, sadness, and anger, because those are the energies that created those situations. And that's one of the ways to maintain your peace. It's one of the ways to shift your perception of the way things are happening in the world, shifts the perception of the way you think about the things that are happening in the world so that you can stay at peace and you're helping yourself and you're helping the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing I took away from that weekend was that I always felt like I was an empath. And so I felt like when I saw these tragic events or when I met someone struggling, that it was part of me just being a great person to feel really crappy about that and to feel their pain. And one of the other teachers there said to me, you know what they need really the most from you right now is not your sympathy, was not you to cry with them. What they really need more than anything else is your peace. Bring them peace. And I thought, wow, I swear I never forgot that. I've shared it with clients. And we can, that's so liberating to know that we can come to that place of love and peace. And that's what you do. And that's what I do. I love transformational hypnosis because it helps people transform those inner subconscious beliefs and quite quickly. So I love that. But it's so important. I mean, I now make that like a number one priority in my life, because without that mindset, we're going to continue down these paths in our lives of living out feelings of unlovability, unworthiness, stupidity, whatever it is that we have as these subconscious drivers. And so shifting that, I think, should be people's number one priority in life. I know it's mine.
Yeah, absolutely. It should be. The issue, of course, is that most people just aren't even in touch with the fact that it's going on for them. And that's what we do in Out of the Matrix weekend is we help them get in touch with the false belief that's been driving their behavior and their choices. And it's usually a very enlightening moment for folks. Sometimes it's somewhat upsetting initially, but eventually they wrap their mind around the idea that, hey, this is what's been going on, and I'm being honest with myself and realizing that is what's happening. And it makes sense to me that you said it's sort of confusing to watch someone go back to an abusive relationship. But if I have an I'm not worthy belief and it's a 9 in my subconscious mind on a scale of 1 to 10, it makes perfectly good sense to me that you would get involved in an abusive relationship. That's the kind of thing that you would be drawn to because it matches up, it resonates with where you're at in terms of your internal understanding of yourself. Your outside experience is going to resonate with that. And that's one of the key components also, key ideas, is this idea that, again, wherever my mind is at in terms of my understanding about myself, that resonates with the outside world and draws to me those experiences. And I make those kind of choices that match up exactly with where I'm at about myself. So again, if I feel like I'm worthless and it's a 9 and someone offers me a terrific job, I'm going to find a reason not to take that job.
Yeah.
So not only am I going to be drawn to horrible experiences, but when wonderful experiences are presented to me, I'm going to come up with a reason or a rationale for why I shouldn't take that job. I'm going to sabotage it, do something so that it does not come into my life because it does not resonate with how I feel about myself.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what we don't realize. We spend so much time, getting an education, building a business, looking for that right relationship. We spend so much time doing that And people don't realize the most important thing you can do for yourself is to work on your inner beliefs, because otherwise we tend to make choices that really don't serve our best interest, and we do that repeatedly, keeping those same patterns from the past until we come to that enlightenment. And that's the same message both of us have, really, is that you need to take a look at those inner beliefs. Now, if you had to give people some key principles that bring peace of mind for people out there, the main theme, I think, of this podcast is transforming the mind, the health, the relationships. And your inner beliefs are important in every one of those arenas. And what people really want more than anything else is peace of mind. They want to experience that. And everything they're trying to do out there in the world is trying to bring them that inner state. And they don't realize that it has to be generated from within and not from without. So if you had to give people some key principles to obtaining that peace of mind, what would that be?
I mean, the first one is something that we talked about already, which is this idea that the way I view the world, I tend to think the way I can show up as a meaningful, powerful person is to be sad and upset and angry when difficult things happen in the world. And so one of the shifts that you can really make in terms of having a more peaceful mindset is to realize that all of those things are a call for love. And we talked about that globally in terms of big events like the shooting in Nashville or other worldwide events or even local events that occur. But you can also do that in your own personal life, because one of the most, I think, valuable things for peace of mind is to recognize projection. In other words, when people are mean, angry, upset, sad, and I'm in that energy and around those kinds of people, and especially when they're family members or people who are close to me and it's happening regularly, I have to recognize that that's the projection from their subconscious mind, and I can't take that personally. It has nothing to do with me. What they're saying and how they're showing up is a witness to what's going on for them, and it has nothing to do with me. I think, the other piece is digging in on some subconscious false beliefs, but that's more of a process. These are just some daily exercises that you can practice. Extend love when there's sadness, extend love when there's anger, extend love when there's hate. That's one of the ways that you can stay in a peaceful mind, realizing that that's what's actually called for in those circumstances. But then also in our personal lives with people who are close to us, we really need to work on not taking things personally. When people are upset, it's a sign of what's going on for them. Now, that doesn't mean there might not be something that we need to look at or examine about our own behavior. We might need to do that. But more often than not, people are projecting their stuff, and we tend to take it personally. If we can stop taking it personally, our peace of mind will grow exponentially.
Yes, yes. And I've noticed that the more I take personal responsibility for my own mood, the more liberated I become. Now, talk a little bit, Chris, about your book. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so one of the sections that we teach in Out of the Matrix is getting people in touch with their inner guide. And your inner guide is just your intuitive self. You have a part of yourself that it just knows what you should or shouldn't do in any particular moment. And again, when I do presentations, I ask people, how often have you just known what the right thing to do was in a particular circumstance? And almost everyone in the room raises their hand. And that's their intuitive self. That's their, what I call your inner guide. And so we all have an inner guide that knows what's best for us and what we should or shouldn't do in any particular circumstance. We tend to be very disconnected from that inner guide. And part of that is because of what we described earlier, when we're being outer directed and focused on the outside world, trying to manage people, stuff, and things in my life, I'm outer directed. I'm directed outside of myself. Very hard to get in touch with my inner guide inside of me when I'm focused on the outside. So the premise of the book is the idea of using some of the techniques that we teach in Out of the Matrix so that I can become more peaceful, so that I can go inside. And when I say understand inside, I mean going inside of myself, inside of my thinking, so I can examine my thinking, because one of the keys is what we call metacognition, which is thinking about my thoughts. Most people just have a thought and they run with it. Metacognition allows, if you do metacognition, you think about, why am I having this thought? Why am I thinking this way? And more often than not, it's because of some subconscious process that's going on for us. Okay. So in the book, what we try and get people in touch with is getting inside of yourself, being in love with yourself, feeling good about yourself, so that you can go inside and tap into that inner guide, because your inner guide broadcasts on the Peace, Love, and Joy Network. And so you want to connect with the peace, love, and joy network frequency wise. When you're at peace, love, and joy, you're much more likely to connect with your inner guide. So that's sort of the premise of the book.
Yeah, very similar to what I teach in my Transformed Life program, is that we have already within us a complete capacity to experience peace, love, and joy in any given moment. And what draws us away are these thought processes, and we can learn to get in touch with the core of who we are. So what are some, you mentioned tools and techniques that you teach. Just give us an example of a tool or technique that someone can utilize to get in touch with that inner guide.
Well, one of the chapters at the end of the book is called Checking In, and checking in is about checking in with your inner guide. And how you do that is you ask for help and then walk away. And what I mean, and I don't mean physically necessarily walk away, but mentally walk away. So you check in, so you ask for, as Tiffani said, you've got the capacity for peace, love, and joy. You've got your inner guide on board, ready and willing to help you at any moment. So when you're struggling with what to do in any particular moment, ask your inner guide in a general sense. In other words, the less specific you can be, the better. When you get specific and say, inner guide, I don't have money in my bank account, please put money in my bank account, then that's the only answer. And there might be other possibilities that could resolve the situation that aren't about putting money in your bank account. And so when you ask for help, you say, I'm upset or bothered by this situation, please help me. And in that way, you're leaving an open book, an open answer, an open-ended answer for your inner guide to offer you. So ask for help, do it in a general sense, and then move on with your day. Don't sit there waiting for the answer. Something will show up later in the day, maybe the next week, that will help you out with whatever it is that's going on. And sometimes the answer for me has been just peace of mind. In other words, I'm bothered or upset by something. I offer it up to my inner guide, and I find that later in the day, I'm at peace with it. And so that's an answer. That's an answer for me, for my inner guide. It's not necessarily what my cognitive, intellectual mind thinks would be the right answer, but peace of mind is, that's the key to everything, is peace of mind. So if the answer I get from my inner guide is peace, I'm thrilled with that.
Yeah, and the beauty of that too is that no matter what religious tradition you adhere to or come from, that is just a foundational truth found therein. So, for the most part, if people are uncomfortable with the word inner guide, they could use whatever word works for them from the religious tradition they belong to, whether it be the Holy Spirit or God. And it's important, I think, for people to understand, especially people that have those feelings of unworthiness and unlovableness, that, and that's something I emphasize over and over again with clients, is that you're not broken and you don't need to be fixed. That you already have perfect mental and emotional health at the core of who you are. And when you remove what's blocking you from experiencing that peace, love, and joy, you fall right naturally into that. That it is these subconscious drivers and these thought processes, that beliefs like that other people are responsible for our happiness, they muddle up what we already possess internally. And so our identity really is not a mental health issue. Our identity is not, I'm struggling emotionally. All of that stuff is not who we are. At the core of who we are this beautiful spiritual person.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely, Tiffani, that at our core, we are this peaceful, loving, joyful being. And one of the things that we've used to cover it up is the focus on external stuff. We can't get in touch with our lovely, beautiful selves if we're so focused on the car and the weather and the sports team and the neighbor and my partner and what's going on with all those people. I'm not saying that we ignore those things, but when I'm focused on them and I'm allowing their behavior and the way they show up to affect my emotional state of being, that's an issue. And that's what I need to get away from, because peace, love, and joy is what I want. And it is, you're right, it's exactly who we are, really. If we can stop with all the layers that we've used to cover it up, you're exactly right. And one of the layers is focusing on external stuff. That's one of the primary issues that we have to overcome.
Yeah, and one of the healthiest beliefs that I have adopted is that there are no bad people, there are only bad beliefs. And I came from a religious cult, as many people know. And in that cult, within our group, we were the good people. We were the people who were favored by God. And everyone else out there in the world, these were the bad people. The way we believed was the only one true way to believe, and everyone out there was evil. And when I left that behind, it was so freeing, because I actually went out in the world. I was very isolated at that time, and I started to experience just connecting with people. And I began to deconstruct some of the religious beliefs I had that were very toxic and harmful. And in the process of deconstructing, I felt so much freedom. And then slowly I came to the realization that I had been brainwashed, so to speak. I don't know about how great that word is to use, but, I had been programmed to see the world in a certain way. And I had this paradigm, and then I'm shifting that paradigm, but I'm slowly coming to the realization as I'm walking through the world, wow, it wasn't just me and this religious group. It's everybody. We all have these subconscious drivers. We all have this programming, and that journey of life that we're on towards, if you want to use the word enlightenment, if you want to use the word wisdom, it doesn't matter, but we're all on this journey. And I thought in that religious group that there was a standard, and I was never meeting that standard. And therefore I was never enough. I was worthless in so many ways. And to realize there is no standard. This is a journey. And it's a journey from moving out of those beliefs that weigh us down and into those beliefs that liberate us and make peace, love, and joy a reality. And what the world really needs is just that. And then we become part of the solution instead of part of the problem.
Yeah, and I love what you said, that there are no bad people, there's just bad beliefs. That's exactly right. People are operating from their subconscious mind, and they're operating from false beliefs that they have about themselves. And if they're shooting people up or they're doing destructive kind of things, it's because of what they think of themselves. And so the key is getting in touch with that. And there was something else that you mentioned. Enlightenment, the idea of enlightenment. If you think about subconscious beliefs, those are subconscious, they're in the dark. And so enlightenment is a process of bringing those false beliefs out of the darkness and into the light. So that's enlightenment as far as I'm concerned, becoming a more conscious person. So when that woman got in touch with the fact that she had an I'm stupid belief, and it was in the dark, it was in her subconscious mind, and it came into her conscious mind, it became into the light. She became more enlightened in that moment because some of her subconscious thinking in the darkness came into the light of her conscious mind, and then she's able to make a choice about it. So I like enlightenment as the idea of becoming a more conscious thinker.
I love that definition of enlightenment, because it doesn't have to be about a certain religious or spiritual tradition. It's just about coming to the light of not just about why you've been living and thinking and behaving the way you have, but how that can change, how you can tap into that peace, love, and joy. And it's so important for every aspect of our lives, and the way we view the world, especially now. There's so much going on, and there's always been a lot going on. But now, for the first time, people are bombarded with all this negativity on social media, and they're sort of being programmed in a certain direction by these algorithms, so that, if they like things that involve hatred and animosity towards certain groups or thought processes, that's what they're being fed. And it's just drawing them away from that potential for peace, love, and joy. They're getting sort of sucked in, and they're getting sucked into the darkness. But ultimately, the choices they're making as they navigate social media also, again, are driven by what they already believe about themselves, about people, about the world that they live in. And the key thing to not just our own personal lives tapping into that love, peace, and joy, but the key for living in a better world is for people out there to learn how to think differently, how to throw off these subconscious beliefs. Because if you look throughout all human history, even just the history of your own family, you could see these ideas of unlovability, unworthiness, not being enough, being stupid. You could see them just sort of passing down from generation to generation. And we have the ability to just stop that and say, it stops here with me. I am going to
Yeah.
direct you, of course.
Yeah, and one of the things that you're making me think about is this idea that one of the things that we might get into later on another podcast is why we created a subconscious mind. Like, what's its purpose? Why do we even have that subconscious mind? Why does it exist? What's going on down there? Why do we need to become enlightened? Why aren't we just naturally that way?
It's becoming apparent to me that if we really want to change the world, we have to begin with ourselves. We have to begin by bringing ourselves, and then we take that love, joy, and peace, and we bring it into our families. We bring it into our relationships. We bring it to work with us. We bring it into our career, whatever, regardless of whatever we do. And that is what truly creates change, not so many things that people are doing. And I'm not downplaying, people who are being activists for a cleaner environment or helping the homeless, anything like that. But interestingly, if it's motivated from a place of love, it has a totally different effect on the world than if it's motivated out from fear and hate, don't you think?
Yeah, 100%. We say that in the weekend a lot in our teachings, is the idea that we're not telling you not to help the environment or go help, save the whales or help the baby humans or do any of those kind of things. The tendency is we tend to do that from a place of sadness, upset, hate, and anger. And so when I'm going to save the whales or save the environment or save the baby children, the baby humans, and I'm doing that from a place of fear, sadness, and upset, that's not going to be as valuable as if I do it from a place of peace, love, and joy. Again, you can do all those things from a place of peace, love, and joy if you recognize that it is hate, upset, anger, and frustration that creates the issues in the first place. And so I have to buy into the idea that I'm going to provide peace, love, and joy to the world. That's part of the solution. And there might be some physical part of the solution again, as well, as I might go out and help things on the level of physicality, physically help things. But I got to do that from a place of peace, love, and joy, or else I'm almost negating what I'm doing if I'm contributing more of the negative energy to the world.
Yes, that right there is so key. Because I feel like, at least like you said, it might not be a reality. It might just be a perception based on what's being promulgated in social media. That that's people are being pushed into more hatred, more division, more polarization. And the one thing I learned coming out of a religious cult is that while I was in this cult, I was 100% positive that I was 100% right about everything I believed. And when I came out, and what actually led me out was the fact that I was so miserable. And I thought, now, why would a God want me to live my life so miserable? And when I began to really take a look at what I believed for the first time, I could see that my misery was a direct result of how I was thinking and believing. And so as I moved out of that and into the world, that needed to transform. And I, as well, have lost my train of thought. I was driving towards a point, and now I'm lost as to where I was going. I don't know why my mind just went.
I know the feeling. I know the feeling. So one of the points that I wanted to make was one of the keys to this process is a lot of people are out there telling you to exercise, eat right, and have positive affirmations. And those are all lovely things and valuable things. I'm not telling you shouldn't do those things. Those are all good things, and you should do those for yourself. But those things all happen on a conscious level. And it turns out that most of our thinking, 95+% of our thinking, is subconscious. And so when we're playing on the conscious level of eating right, exercising, and using positive affirmations or some other view like that in terms of being positive, the problem is we're battling 5% of our thinking with 95% of our thinking. And when 95% of our thinking is subconscious and it's about false beliefs and it's about upset and anger, that's going to overcome that 5% of conscious thinking. So that's why, out of the matrix, we go after people's upsets. We want them to understand why they're upset, and so that we can do what you said earlier, which is shorten the length of an upset. And that leads to a happier life. We're not telling people that you're going to be happy 100% of the time. I still get upset and bothered by things, but I snap back more quickly to my happiness because I understand the source of my upsets and then it's my thinking. And if I can switch my thinking, I can get back to my happiness much more quickly.
That is a super important point, and I'm glad you brought that up. Is and I see that with clients a lot. Is they come in, they say, I do something about my anxiety, and then they tell me, I say, what do you really want? I want to be 100% free of anxiety. It's not going to happen. You're never going to have perfect thinking to where you never get upset about anything or react to what anyone says. But the key is that, we want to move from more pathological, life dominating to I have tools to manage life. So, yeah, I'm not going to be perfect. I'm still going to get upset, but I have the tools to snap back and bring that out because I'm making a shift so that my subconscious beliefs are becoming empowering and shifting from that disempowering victimhood to the personal responsibility and the positive empowerment. And that's why I love working with the subconscious mind, because people have tried for years and years and years, and I know I did, and I wasn't making progress because I wasn't addressing the subconscious mind. I was making a little bit of progress, but I thought to myself, I'm going to be 90 years old and I'm going to still be struggling because I can't seem to alter these internal beliefs that I was starting to become aware of. So learning to shift those on a subconscious level is what I've been all about. And honestly, Chris, it was out of the matrix that put me on this path. I mean, I have to say, if I hadn't gone to that weekend, I think I still would have been groping blindly through the world, unless I came across it in another way. But I wouldn't be doing what I do and helping the hundreds of people I'm helping now if it wasn't for that experience it was an awakening for me of realizing. And I literally walked into that weekend at the lowest point in my entire life. And when I left, it was like a burden, a huge burden that had been weighing me down, had been lifted off of my back. And I just felt lighter and freer. So people think that taking personal responsibility for your thinking and your feelings and your moods is something that's, debilitating or hard to do. It's actually liberating because now I have a path out. And before I was stuck like in quicksand. I was going nowhere and I didn't have tools and techniques to help me. And then, I now realized that I had my work cut out for me, but I had a path out, and that was so freeing for me.
Yeah, one of the comments that we often get from folks who've taken the Out of the Matrix weekend is they feel like they have a bookshelf full of self-help books, and Out of the Matrix sort of gave them the practical application of how to put that into play in their life. Because there's a lot of books out there teaching a lot of different ideas, and we've narrowed it down to a very specific technique of getting in touch with those false beliefs, identifying when they're spiking in my life so that I can make a different choice. And it makes a tremendous difference in people's lives. It just does.
Yeah, I think people have come to believe that they look at their lives and they think, I have all these complex problems because I have problems in relationships. I have problems in my self-worth, problems with childhood trauma, all this. And it looks so incredibly complex. And then you go to a lot of different treatments and therapies, and they tend to continue to foster the idea that the solution is complex. It requires years of therapy for you to make progress, or they give them the diagnosis of you are chronically going to be this way. There's no help for you. You're going to be struggling the rest of your life. It's so debilitating to hear these words. And so people just end up having this idea that the solution to what I'm going through must be complex because the problem's so complex. And really, it's not complex. It's quite simple. It's not always easy, but the solution is simple, and the way the mind works is simple. And the solution to that is simple. And we do not need all of these complex solutions and years of study in order to change. Change can occur pretty rapidly when you have this, enlightenment we talked about.
Yeah, and one of the issues that people struggle with is oftentimes they're told the way to peace of mind is for you to figure out how to manage these outside circumstances in your life, how to manage your partner, how to manage your parents, how to manage your job, how to manage all those different things. And again, on a physical level, you do have to manage those things, but emotionally, the management is going to happen inside of you. And that's one of the keys, is to recognize, it's life-changing to recognize it's not about my boss or my partner or my mom or my dad. It's about how I handle what goes on between the two of us. It's what's going on inside of me, again, which is the key. And that's one of the key components to this whole process. You're absolutely right, is recognizing, and it's a very simple idea. It's much more simple than trying to manage all those outside circumstances and outside people. If I can just manage my own process internally with my thinking. And again, it's simple. It's not necessarily easy, but it's a key. And to be honest with you, a lot of people struggle with, even when they're presented with these ideas, they don't want to take them on. It seems like people have to be in the right space to be able to buy into this, which is fine.
Yeah, yeah. I think people reject it because they feel like they are powerless to change their internal world, but really they're not. You know, they've lived their whole lives trying to rearrange their external environment so that they'll be happy. And it's never been working. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast and you think about it, has that worked well for you? Yeah. Sometimes it'll work well for a little bit because we say, when I get that new car, I'm going to be happy. It has that new car smell. You're driving it, it feels great. And within 2 or 3 weeks, internally, it doesn't do anything for you. And it becomes, most of the time, exactly like the car you just had. It just becomes a part of your life. It's in the periphery. You're not even noticing it. This happens in relationships. People think, if I could just get her or him, my life will be complete. And then you get in that relationship and the honeymoon phase is over and you're stuck with the reality of, this is another human being with issues and things they have to work through, and the fantasy disintegrates. And then what happens is people will move on to think, okay, now I just need this person or that person, or I need this job or that job. And you will continue that exhausting path for the rest of your life until you make that shift and realize that where the real source of the problem is. And that's where you have the power to change. That is the great news. So it's really it's a message of hope. It's a message of truth. And it's a message of empowerment. So, Chris, it's been absolutely great talking to you. We're running out of time, but tell people how they could find out more about Out of the Matrix. I know some of the listeners are going to be really intrigued and think, how do I find out about this great weekend that they've been talking about?
Yeah, so we're in the process of reconstructing our website. I'm not sure how it might be available, it might not, but you can go to outofthematrix.org, outofthematrix.org. That's the website. I have a website for my book, Chris Lauretig, LAURETIG.com. You can get in touch with me. My email is chris@outofthematrix.org, chris@outofthematrix.org. If you're interested in the book or the weekend or any kind of personal coaching, you can get in touch with me through the email. And the websites are available for you to look into things if you want to.
All right. And we will put that information down in the show notes. So if you want to get in touch with Chris or myself and talk about any of these things, learn how you can shift on a subconscious level, please feel free to do so. So absolute pleasure talking to you today, Chris. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Tiffany, was fantastic. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to A Transformed Life, the podcast that celebrates personal and professional transformations. I hope that you found inspiration and practical tips to help you on your own transformation journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe to this podcast so that you don't miss out on future episodes. I have some incredible guests lined up, and I want to share their stories with you. I would also appreciate it if you could leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps me to improve and reach more people who need to hear these stories of transformation. So thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of A Transformed Life.